Thank you for joining us, guys. We had a little issue with the link, so I believe that could have attributed to the small number of people today. But nonetheless, it takes one person to change the world. So thank you for joining us, guys. So just again, while Rob is speaking, for any audio feedback issues, you can just leave yourself on mute. And then if you want to ask a question, there's a raise hand function, or you can use the chat, where when Rob gets a chance, he'll definitely be looking at those and then answering questions and have a discussion around that. But with no further ado, Rob, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. I need permission to share my screen. Russell and Neil and Malusi and Lucy. It's a nice, small, intimate group. So I think we must approach this slightly differently. If we have a big group, then when people jump in, it becomes complicated. But with a small group like this, I don't have a problem with you jumping in at any stage to make comments, ask questions. Russell, you've got quite a bit of experience and knowledge. So if you want to add to anything, I think in South Africa, we've got a few small programs that have showed their face and then disappeared and showed their face again and disappeared again. But I'm quite excited about what I see happening at MAC. Russell, have you got a bit more information on where you're at MAC and how things are looking?
Yes, Rob, I can fill you in. We started the year with a real fiery enthusiasm and things were rocking. We received our boats in February, unpacked the container, got the boats into the yard and started looking at rigging them and everything. And all of a sudden, the world just went bang upside down. Yeah. So it's kind of shafted some of our developments, but we've got now at MAC, we've actually got 5 yachts. The original prototype, 4 brand new glass fiber boats. They're the more sophisticated rigs, Rob, with the tilting seat platform. I don't know if you sailed on one with the tilting seat yet.
No, not yet.
And I'm busy now starting to get the others all together and rigging them. We've got dollies for all of them. And we're hoping, I'm planning to get some training done with some volunteers so that we can get a regular launch party together, because that's quite a challenge at MAC. It's nice that we've had winter rains here in Cape Town. The flay's nice and full. But we're looking at being able to do some sailing. We were targeting the beginning of this month, but it's looking like more the last week of this month we're going to have boats in the water again.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, of course the COVID has put a spanner in a lot of our little works, but I mean, how many boats did you get, Russell?
We got 4 from China, and then of course we've got the prototype, which is Alex's boat, and then we've actually got another wooden boat, which is mine, which was prototype number 2. Okay. It's a hull. The keel just needs to be bolted together. Then all the fittings need to be put on. And I'm planning to do a few little changes to it. I want to do the roller furling head sail. Looking at trying to do a roller furling asymmetric as well, just to broaden the controls on the boat to make it a bit more user-friendly in some instances. But yeah, we certainly, I think by the time sort of September comes around, we should be looking at rocking on a regular basis. We just have a problem with getting the sailing center structured with a regular sail trainer, recognized and certified SAS trainer. But basically the facilities are all there. We are looking at change room facilities as well, which I think you can relate to the challenges that we have there, Rob, with getting that sort of facility up.
Well, Russell, that will be the first truly adaptive center once you've got everything going, and I think it'll be almost a flagship that we can show to everyone in the country as to what can be done in that. So, you know, I think very exciting stuff there, and hopefully it all gets going properly. You built a new marina or walk on mooring or something to get the guys into the boats, or?
Okay, we were very fortunate that there was a jetty there already, which the powerboats use in the flag, and we've not fended it up too well. We need to extend it a little bit more. But what we do have is we've got 2 loading cranes,
Okay.
Harnesses, you know. Going back to our adventures in Pattaya with getting me on and off the boat, these are little manually operated cranes, so you can strap the person in. So we can load any level of disability without having to manhandle them too much in and out of the boat. And it's much safer this way.
No, brilliant. I tell you what I'm going to do, everybody, is I'm going to go through the presentation. There's a lot of parts in this presentation that I don't think are very applicable to what we're doing. So, or it's not. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But I'm going to go through everything, and just stop me if you have any questions or comments. And then I think it's important to have a little chat afterwards about where we're going in South Africa. And obviously the center at MAC is quite a key thing that's happening now. And I'm hoping that everyone learns from each other rather than trying to compete with each other. So let's get to it. So firstly, just the Paralympics. This is a question often asked. Why Paralympics? What's important about it? Our first task and our first mission is to get people with disabilities sailing. We want to get as many people sailing as possible. We're not too worried about the Paralympic side of it initially. However, the Paralympics are important because they do draw the whole process up, and there's funding available if we're in the Paralympics from the IOC and various other organizations that are linked to the Paralympics. So it is important from a world sailing point of view, and from any country who's wanting to develop, that we do that we are in the Paralympics. But I don't want any program that we develop to be focused on performance. I think we need to focus on getting people onto the water and creating this opportunity for people to sail. And that's what is important. Where are we with the Paralympics? Obviously, I'm hoping you all know, for 2020, now 21, we were removed from the Paralympics. Sailing was removed from the Paralympics as a Paralympic sport, and World Sailing employed a para manager and changed the whole structure to try and get us back in. A little bit too little too late, and things weren't managed very well before, and unfortunately we ended up out, and we tried to get back for Paris, and unfortunately we were turned down for Paris, so we are not back in the Olympics for Paris, but we are now working on the next one down the line, which is USA, I think New York or something, but in 2028. So World Sailing's working there. Our biggest barrier is the amount of countries that compete in Paralympic or para competitions. So we want more countries to compete in our world championships and in various championships. So that's where we are at the moment. There's a lot of politics on that level, so hopefully we get back in sometime. Just, I think at this stage I want to talk, I believe, Russell, you've seen the South African Sailing Disability Manual, which comes from a manual that was developed with US Sailing, and World Sailing, and they developed this whole manual, which is quite a substantial manual. It is a work in progress, so a lot of changes. There are people making changes all the time, but I think it is quite a substantial manual. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, so as to where it's available and how you can get it and any comments on it. But if we look at it in this, so a lot of the information I'm talking about today comes out of that manual, but there's some additions to it, because the USA has a lot of money. They have very well developed sailing federation, where we are not. So, and we don't have a lot of money. So there's a lot of things we need to change in the way we look at it. Important for me is that the definition, the term disability, is defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. The important thing here is we must always put the sailor before the disability, always put the person before the disability. We are looking at people who have something slightly different to us, and that is the way we must look at it. Don't talk about a disabled sailor. It is a sailor with a disability. We don't talk about disabled boats or disabled people, or that it is people with disabilities and people that are slightly different or more challenged than what able-bodied people are. So why is access for people with disabilities important? And for me, this is a no-brainer, but it's interesting how many people don't really think about it. The first thing is to grow the sport of sailing. 15% of the world has some form of disability, and I believe that's excluding mental disabilities, so people with mental disabilities. But 15%, that means if we do not market to these people, we're losing out on 15% of our market. And we'll probably find in South Africa a similar sort of figure of 15-odd%. So to grow the sport of sailing, we need to add sailing for people with disabilities into our whole armory and get more people on the water by offering sailing for people with disabilities. We need to increase our market, so that increases the market, create opportunity. There's a lot of people who develop disabilities or become disabled, and even people who are born with disabilities that are packed away. They don't have an opportunity to get out there and do something physical because people think they can't. And sailing offers an opportunity for people to really get out there and experience freedom, experience the sea and the sun, which is so good for us, and be competing on an even, relatively even keel to people who are able-bodied. So it creates a huge amount of opportunities for people with disabilities. We can run competitions that are inclusive for all. So people who are able-bodied and people with disabilities, whatever that disability is, can compete evenly. We just need the right equipment, and we need to be accommodating of these people and don't look down on them. We need to be aware that there is a negative culture, and in South Africa there is still a negative culture around people with disabilities. In some cultures in our country, people born with disabilities are labeled and hidden away, and they aren't brought out and allowed to live their lives. So it is our responsibility to change these cultural negatives that are out there, even within our educated population. In South Africa, I find if you see someone in a wheelchair, and Russell, you probably have first-hand knowledge of this, but you see someone in a wheelchair and the people sort of look at them like they're a freak. They're not a freak, they're just a person in a wheelchair. And this is very common. It's very common in a lot of countries, but your more first world countries, it's less so. If I go to the UK, I'll walk around the street and there'll be stacks of people on little motorized wheelchairs and things, and nobody even gives a second glance because they have realized these are just people with a slight different way of getting around. So it is our responsibility to change this perception. And if we have sailing programs for people with disabilities, we have the ability to help people change that thinking. When I started working with people with disabilities, I came into this thinking, gee, how am I going to work with these people? How am I going to interact with these people? And I had to go through a learning curve of, you just do it. They just normal people that need slightly different things. And every instructor that we work with in our centers in South Africa, if they are exposed to people with disabilities, they will learn that, gee, it's just other people, great people. Let's get on with our lives and just accommodate that. So we have a responsibility there, and this is what sailing can do in our country. Disability categories, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you've got physical impairments, you've got visual impairments. Physical, you're looking at amputations, arthritis, cerebral palsy, diabetes, injuries to the spine and that sort of thing. Those are physical disabilities. Visual impairments, as it is, one of the big learning things I had, I heard about this blind match racing, and I mean, boats close to each other and these people are blind. I thought, whoa, this is an accident waiting to happen. But it's amazing how able these people are to do this, and how they are aware of where the wind's coming from and how the boat is moving. It's amazing. So visual impairments, also mixing crews, someone who is able-bodied with a person who's visually impaired. Guys, it can benefit the able-bodied guys because those visually impaired people know exactly where the wind's coming from, I can promise you. Hearing impairments, and remember, vision impairments is not just blindness. It can be tunnel vision and all sorts of other things. There are a lot of classifications in vision impairments. Hearing impairments, people who are deaf, working with them. Developmental disabilities, now I have to keep my notes available here. Developmental disabilities are things like Down syndrome and autism. Those are examples of developmental disabilities. And then there are others, I've just highlighted a few. And then cognitive disabilities, I was interested to see ADHD and then autism spectrum disorder is one. And then post-traumatic stress disorder is something that we have heard about. Just going back to the disability categories, if you are going to compete in an international event, you have to be classified. And there's specific classifiers who then will classify your disability. And this gets done at events. So if you travel to a World Championships, there'll be classifiers at the World Championship who will then be able to classify you. But if we are competing within our country in open events that are like the 2.4 and the Hansa have open events which are open to able-bodied and people with disabilities, then you don't need classification. So, and we mustn't worry about classification within the country at this stage. I don't think it's necessary to do that. So we need to create access. We need to create programs in schools where people can, with disabilities, can realize they can have access to sailing. We need to look at what market we are going to aim this at. So the center at MAC has, I think, gone all the way. You're setting up to be a center that can handle people of all levels of disability. But maybe you haven't got that facility. So maybe you'll aim at people with amputations, and just amputations. It can be, you can classify below the knee amputations because those people are very mobile. And you can say, right, we're going to do something just with people with below the knee amputations. So decide on the market you can handle and get something going. You need to look at your facilities, what facilities you've got, what staff, and what equipment. We're going to go through a few of these. So as I said, who can we cater for? Who do we have equipment that can work for, and what level of disability? We'll talk a bit more about equipment, and we don't want to create barriers. We want to create opportunities. Also look who is in the area. If you look around, contact schools and care centers and see what type of people. I know in Antigua there's a big movement for people with mental disabilities, because there's a lot of people because of drug abuse, and I would guess this is something that happens in the Western Cape a lot too. You get a lot of people with fetal alcohol syndrome. So the Caribbean has focused, or Antigua specifically, has focused a lot on people with fetal alcohol syndrome. So look who's in your area, decide on those people, realize that there's a market, we're going to cater for these people. If you decide you're going to work with amputees, but there's no amputees in your area, you're also wasting your time. Okay, how to approach? Well, it's where to get the people and how to approach the people. The approach is important, that I think we are offering an opportunity to have a go. We're not trying to create an Olympic champion. Don't promise things of all greatness and everything like that. Just offer the opportunity to come and have a sale to people. Say we specialize in people who are not that able, and we work. We would like to give you the opportunity to have a go on the boat. So think of how you're approaching the people. Don't try and look at long term. Don't look at retention. Just get them on the water. Other sports organizations are very important. In a lot of countries, I know marathon running. So in wheelchairs, the marathon wheelchairs, and in South Africa, our sprinting, the para sprinting, took off with our good friend Oscar. Actually inspired quite a few people to get involved. So look at other sports in the area. At Stellenbosch, there's quite a big center for athletics for people with disabilities. Swimming in South Africa has been quite successful. And approach them, offer their athletes an opportunity just to get on a boat. So other sports are a good place to also start. Facilities, we need to look at facilities. Now, please, number one, don't make barriers. Don't create barriers. There's a way to get people onto the water. Sometimes it's not possible, but then look what is possible. You can put a temporary ramp up. You can create a toilet facility that's slightly bigger reasonably easily. But if not, then get a porta toilet in if you need to. If your people live close enough, then make it a thing that they get changed and get ready at home, and they get to the water and get on the water from there. That's depending on how far they live from the place. Over and above everything, what you do needs to be safe. So people with disabilities are used to a bit of discomfort and a bit of hardship in getting things right. So don't try and create the perfect system before you start. Get the thing going, unless you're into a lot of money, and then you can create a perfect system and get it going. But don't create barriers. Think of things like, there's that picture there of the wheelchair with balloon tires on the beach. You can operate off a beach, ride the wheelchair into the water, lift the person out of the water into the boat, and with low lifts there, and you can get that going, especially with kids, and in warm weather, of course. Getting into a boat off of a jetty, a lot of people can move themselves from the jetty into the boat, as long as they are not quadriplegic in what they're doing. Some people can move themselves, some can't. Speak to the people and find out what they can do and what they can't do. Just think of accessibility as in a couple of things. Firstly, your position. Is your yacht club, is your training center accessible to people from with disabilities? Then you need to look at your buildings. There are specifications, and within the manual, there's a lot of specifications there. Bottom line is the door's got to be wide enough to get a wheelchair through, and the bathroom's got to, or the toilet's got to be big enough that the wheelchair can get in, and they must have handles where the person can maneuver themselves. That's the main things. There are other things you can do, but please don't create barriers. Don't wait till you've got the perfect system. Launching, as I said, a lot of people can sit on a floating jetty and maneuver themselves into a boat. The cranes are not that complicated to build, so you can build reasonable cranes that are hand operated that can get people into boats. You can carry people. There's ways we'll look at a bit later on carrying people. Make sure your water quality is good enough, but most importantly, keep it simple. Don't get too complicated. We don't necessarily need electric winches and all that sort of thing to get in. Staff and volunteers, here we need people to help. Remember, most people with a reasonably serious disability will have a carer. So accommodate those carers. Give the opportunity to train those carers in what's happening with the boat. How do you tie the boat alongside? How's the boom going to behave when the boat's on the shore? Bring the carers in, make them part of the situation. You can also allow the carers to have a break while you're sailing. So then you need volunteers that are willing to work with the people and help them. Some important points when training instructors that don't normally work with people with disability. Hypo and hypothermia, so body cooling and heating, is very important. A lot of people, if I can't feel my legs, I don't know if my legs are warm or cold. So I might be losing a lot of heat through my legs without even realizing it. So be aware that people can get too hot or too cold very quickly without even realizing it. So you've got to, or your instructor has to, be aware of this. Bruising, cutting, and overextending. So bruising, if I put someone in the boat and I don't look where their elbow is going to hit, their elbow could hit the side of the boat without them even realizing it. You might need to be in control of that. Where's their leg going to bump against? Are there sharp points that they can cut themselves on? It is the coach or the instructor's responsibility to look at this. A big one, and one that I really had to learn, is overextending. If I put someone in the boat who does not have control of their legs, I need to constantly be aware of what their legs are doing, because they could have their leg twist underneath them and they could sit on their leg and actually break a bone without even realizing it. So you need to watch how their legs are when you put them into the boat. You need to watch what their arms and legs are doing. You are the eyes and the ears and the feeling of this person, because they don't have the feeling that most people do. We need to be aware of bags and catheters. Don't let it freak anyone out. just make sure you're aware that this can't get pushed against some sharp object or squeezed against the edge of the boat. And it is something that needs to be emptied every now and then. So the person with the disability will have to tell you, geez, I need to empty this bag. Cushions, most people will have extra cushions, and it is very important. If you're sitting on your bum the whole time, you need to have good cushioning, otherwise you develop bed sores. So a lot of sailors with disabilities will bring their own cushion. If they don't, you need to think about that. What cushions are suitable, and how can I make these cushions available? Remember, if a person uses their own cushion from their wheelchair, you need to make them aware that this cushion could get wet. So be sure that it is a cushion that can get wet. Make them aware that it possibly can get wet. Otherwise, offer another cushion. Sun protection, again, in a lot of cases, people are always covered up, so their skin isn't used to the sun. Now suddenly you put them on a boat where they're exposed and they don't feel the sun burning them. So be aware that the sun is your responsibility as an instructor to make sure that they're not getting burned. Make sure there is sun protection, hats, and sunscreen. Life jackets and buoyancy aids, just like anybody else, we do expect our people with disabilities to wear life jackets or buoyancy aids. Now, thinking of sitting in a chair, very often a life jacket is the better option. In South Africa, inflatable life jackets are not that common, but they work the best because they're not bulky and they don't have anything at the back of the person. But again, please don't create barriers. If you don't have something like that, buoyancy aids can be used and they can be made comfortable with other cushions. So don't let life jackets be a barrier, but you need to make sure people do wear life jackets and buoyancy aids on these boats. If it's a big yacht, different story. The same rules apply as would apply to anyone else, unless there's a chance that they could fall off the boat. Medication, a lot of people with disabilities need to take chronic medication, and at certain times and places, make sure you're aware what they need and make sure that you are that it is accessible to them. So if you're an instructor or coach, that you can take it to them. On ratios, make sure that you are safe. We want to run safely on the water. So if you can comfortably handle 6 people, that's fine. Make sure it's safe. Normally your ratios do reduce with people with disabilities, but just make sure it is safe. It depends what level of disability you're working with, how often they've sailed, and that sort of thing. But on the water, off the water, it is more labor intensive with a lot of people because sometimes you have to use a hoist to put them in the water or in the boat, and that'll take a couple of people to get that going. The wheelchair has to be taken away and put in a safe place, or limbs that a person's amputee and they've got a prosthetic, you would want to get that away and put it safely. So it does require more people. Again, please don't make that a barrier. If you can only handle one person on the water, just handle one person, but don't not do it because you think you can't handle 6 people. Protection of vulnerable groups, so thinking of your child protection and your protection of people from vulnerable groups. A person with disability is more, it can be more susceptible to abuse. So be aware of that, make sure your instructors are aware of that, and always make sure it's safe. Handling and working with people with disabilities, please make sure you communicate properly. Work out what that communication is. Some people would battle to hear, some people battle to speak. So I worked with a guy who's an amazing kid, Jordan Milroy. He's got serious cerebral palsy. His hobby is climbing towers. So he spends his time in a wheelchair. He can't walk with unaided, but he can get himself up and pull him up. But he climbs to the top of the Empire State Building and these places to raise money for wheelchairs for people in the Caribbean. But this kid, when he talks, I call him a kid, I think he's 23, 24, 26 or something like that now. But when he talks, it's very difficult to hear what he's saying. And you've really got to listen carefully, and sometimes you won't understand. So you need a communication with him that the important things you can understand. So yes and no, very important things. I need to understand when he does not want me to do something, or when he's not feeling comfortable, or when things are just not right. So yes and no, you can use hand signs like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or whatever the case may be, but make sure you can communicate with your sailors. Very important. Ask, ask, ask. Your sailor lives a life that they are living. They know what they can do and can't do. They know what will challenge them and what won't challenge them. They know what they want to do and what they don't want to do. So ask them. If you are trying to get a boat that's not a boat that's not a normal accessible boat, you might be wanting to make adaptations. Speak to the sailor. Ask them what do they need to get across from one side of the boat to another. But speak to the people all the time. Ask them, speak to them, get their view on things. Don't try and be clever. Respect personal space. Someone in a wheelchair, their wheelchair is their personal space. Don't just go and lean on it or grab it or do that sort of thing. A big lesson I had to learn: when someone's in a wheelchair and they're battling, don't just go and push the wheelchair. Ask them, do they need help? And they will tell you if they want help or if they don't want help. If they don't want help, back off. Don't force yourself on them. If I'm battling up a hill and someone comes and pushes me on my ass, I might just get upset with them. So be aware, personal space. They have personal space, and you can't just enter that personal space without permission. Ask them and ask how to do it. Where may you grab? Where may you not grab? When you're loading a sailor into the boat, ask them, can I take you? Can I lift you like this? What can I do? Speak to them. Ask them. With rigging the boat, ask them what can they do? Can they lean forward to grab this rope or can't they? And then personal support in the boat. Some people might need support for their upper body, their torso. If they've got low stability, they might need support. Find out what they need. Find out where they want the cushions. Just speak to your sailors and they will tell you. Most importantly, be patient. Another big lesson I had to learn when working with people with disabilities: everything takes longer. Don't rush it. If you think of a person getting changed who's paralyzed from their waist down, it's quite a mission for them to get into a wetsuit. I can promise you that, if at all possible. So you've got to be aware that these things take longer. It is not like working with people that you can say, hey, go and jump into that boat and I'll be with you now. It doesn't work like that. So be patient, very important. Right, looking at equipment, and this is probably something that becomes the biggest barriers, and it's not necessary to be a barrier. So sailing boats, look what you've got. And we saw a program in Naval where they did a little adaptation on the Hellcat, and it had a seat that they took the trampoline out and put a seat in, and they could put a person who's in a wheelchair into the seat, and they can sail the Hellcat. look what you've got and see if it can be adapted for the people you've got sailing with you. Speak to the people, say to them, right, here's this boat. What can we do to make it that you can sail it? Is it possible or isn't it possible? A lot of boats are able to adapt to take people sailing. Keel boats are ideal. We can adapt most keel boats to carry people. Catamarans can be adapted to most people. Dinghies, it depends how the seating is in the dinghy, but a lot of dinghies can be adapted. Remember, people with disabilities can go into the water. If they're wearing a buoyancy aid life jacket, they can go into the water. They're not going to melt. So if the boat capsizes, just make sure you know how you're going to get them either back into that boat or into a safety boat. Make sure you've got a plan on how to do it. So look at who you're teaching, what they need, and talk to them. Speak to them about what they need. What is suitable? Basically, a lot of boats can be made suitable. But what is ideal? We'll look at a list of boats in a moment as to see what is ideal and what is suitable. Safety craft. A safety boat, again, don't create barriers. You get fantastic safety boats that are like a landing craft that have a door that folds down and you can pull someone out of the water. You can even load a wheelchair onto it. Great stuff. But most places don't have this. Mostly you would use a rubber inflatable boat, or as we call them, ducks in South Africa, a rubber duck. Smaller is better because if you are getting people out the water, so if you're close to the water, it's easier to get people out the water. So don't look at trying to go with these huge big boats that are going to accommodate wheelchairs. Mostly wheelchairs are not going to go on the water in the powerboat. We are running a sailing experience here. So safety boats, a nice low inflatable boat is the best way to go, because your challenge, if the boat capsizes or if the person falls out the boat, you're going to have to get them out of the water into your boat, and then you can take them to shore, lying on the bottom of the boat or sitting on the bottom of the boat, and get them out at the jetty. So think of what you're going to have to do with a safety boat. But please, again, highlight, don't create barriers. Safety boats don't need to be barriers. So here we've got a bunch of boats. I'm going to start with the prototype in the middle there. Russell can tell us a little bit more about the boat later, because for me, between us, I think it's the best boat at the moment on the market for people with disabilities. And I'm hoping it becomes more and more in the world market of sailing. And that's the SV14. Great little boat. I'm very impressed with it. Amazing price coming out of China. And you can build it yourself. So, I'm going to, Russell, I'll leave that one to you actually, don't you want to jump in and tell us a bit about the SV14 right now?
Okay, Rob, yeah, with pleasure. I think just in the context of how you started the discussion this evening by highlighting the fact that we were dropped out of the Paralympics, really the cost of entry to the sport was the cost of boats and the global spread of them. So the SV14 is actually a reaction and a response to that. A low-cost, sexy-looking boat that can put people with disabilities on the water. And the challenge to Simonis was get us a boat that we can deliver under $4,000. So that's what the SV14 is doing for us now. And it's great because it's got so many different configurations. You can sail it single-handed if you want to, but mostly you sail it two up. And with that, you can mix different disabilities. And I'm looking forward to my opportunity of sailing with my blind friends and deaf friends as well. But when I was in Pattaya, I sailed with Cherry, who was an amputee. So, you know, it's nice to mix, and the SV14 is really making waves. And at the moment, there's a big move in Germany and in Hamburg at the NRV. They've ordered 9 boats, and they're sailing with 2, which we organized through Holland, and the boat is really taking off. So we're looking forward to being movers and shakers in this world of sailing for people with disabilities.
Thank you, Russell. Yes, I must say I sailed the boat, and I worked in Pattaya with a whole bunch of people who had some who had never sailed before, and some who had sailed other boats, and the boat really lent itself very well. And what's big to me is it looks like a nice boat. If you look at a lot of the adaptive boats, and that they look different, but this looks like a really attractive boat. It sails well, and it is very safe. So really nice boat. And the big thing is the cost. So if we look at the picture on your screen, the left-hand yellow sail is the Hansa 303, which is an official para boat at the moment. But the boat looks like a bathtub, and it doesn't have a vang on the boom. So when you jibe the boat or head downwind, the boom flies up, and you get a lot of weird twisting happening. And that boat is a lot more expensive than the SV14. So the Hansa has its place because it is a stable boat. It is offering opportunity for people to learn. And it really, even people who are able-bodied can jump into it. It works with a joystick. So you have a joystick in the middle of the boat that you steer with. You can reef the sails, so roll the sails up, the jib or the main. So a very nice boat that can works very well, can be sailed double-handed or single-handed. And now I'm falling into this trap. When you're working with people with disabilities, you never talk about double-handed and single-handed, because that can refer to how many hands they've got, and some people have got one hand. So 2-person and 1-person boats. You can sail that to 2 people or 1 person. And yeah, then moving on to the third one along the top, the Hobie. These Hobies have seats on the edge, so basically hiking seats, giving a bit more leverage for someone to move out onto off the trampoline and give a bit more leverage. But the Hobie can very easily be adapted for people with disabilities. Then there's a trimaran here. That's not the Weta. I can't remember which trimaran that is. That's the Hobie type trimaran. But trimarans work very well. There's another one below it. They're quite exciting to sail, and are very good for people with disabilities. Then looking at the second row on the left-hand side, that is the 2.4. That is another recognized boat in the world sailing fray for people with disabilities. And that is a single-handed boat, also sailed in the open class. So the Hansa at the top is also sailed in an open class in championships. But this is the 2.4 is a very technical boat to sail. It's like a small keel boat that you sit right in the boat, single-handed or 1-person boat. A lot of rig settings and tuning that you can do on the boat. Russell, if I'm not mistaken, you sailed that in the Olympics. Was it 2006?
No, Olympics Sydney 2000. I sailed the 2.4. Okay. Rob, if I may just share with you, yeah. I've sailed 3, basically of the boats you're talking about, I've sailed 3 of them. Okay. The SV14 being my favorite at the moment. But I did the 2.4 in the Paralympics in 2000. And as you say, it's a very complicated, very technical boat. And it is a non-classified boat. So you were sailing against people with disabilities who were more able than I was, per se. The other boat which you talked about was the trimarans, and the one I have sailed is the Challenger. And the Challenger was very much designed around people with disabilities because the young lady who it was designed for, Sernanne Campbell, she was disabled herself. And it's a fun boat to sail, but yeah, it's very basic. But again, cost, and it's only really located in the UK.
Yes. Yes, so the Challenger, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on the second row, that trimaran there is a Challenger.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, so big things here is cost and ease of sailing, and then what you're trying to achieve. So what I saw with the Hunters is you get someone who's maybe an amputee in their hands, and that means they've got one hand to steer and to sheet the sheets, which gets complicated, where you can reach controls and that sort of thing. The going on to the small keel boat, so the sonar was an Paralympic class, and that one works with a certain number of points. So when you are classified, you'll get a set of a number of points for your actual disability, and then the total on the boat needs to add up to a certain number of points. So you can have a person who's a mild amputee, below the knee amputee, so they're almost fully mobile, and someone who is a quad, and someone who has a hand amputation, and then you put them together. As long as they fit within the amount of points, then they can race together. The going down to the bottom, the left-hand side at the bottom is the RS Venture. This is a RS Venture keel with the adaptive kit in it. So a boat that was originally designed for groups of people to sail in, they've now put an adaptive kit in. It works with a joystick again, and it has two seats next to each other. Also, world sailing using that as a racer. Quite an expensive piece of kit. Definitely out of reach of most of us in South Africa, but a nice powerful boat. I find it's a little bit too powerful. We've got to reef it down very early on. So if we get to 10 knots, we start wanting to reef the mainsail on the boat, because it tends to lie on its ear quite quickly. And then on the right at the bottom is the Scud 18, which was also the other Paralympic boat. So the 2.4 sonar in the middle and the Scud 18 were the Paralympic boats. The Scud 18, a ridiculously expensive piece of kit, but it was designed by the same person who designed the 49er and the 29er, Julian Bethwaite. And the idea was to get something that is sort of skiffy, but for people with disabilities. And there, again, you had a point system going. Generally, the person at the back of the boat just steers the boat, and they were had a higher level of disability, and then the person at the front was generally an amputee, and they controlled all the ropes and lines and everything, and they could also move around a lot more. There's like almost a horse. It's not a seat. You had to keep your bum on the horse, but you could move across to either side of the boat. So those are examples of a few boats. Without any bias, and not because Russell's on this call, but the SV14, an amazing option we've got. But that said, a lot of us, we need to look what's in our clubs and see how we can adapt it. Don't let the equipment be the barrier to what we are doing. What other equipment we need to look at? Getting people in and out of boats. So you can see top left is with two people helping someone into a boat. Next one is with helping with one person helping. And just on those two methods, please be safe. I've seen people fall over with someone when they're holding someone and they're stepping into the boat. That's not what we want. If someone falls into the water, it's not a big train smash. But if you fall over on the jetty and hit someone's ribs against the side of the jetty or side of the boat, that is a thing we don't want. So when you are putting people into the boats and taking them out of the boats, be safe. You can see on the right picture here, there's a box which is designed so the actual bridge that goes over to the boat is on hinges, and the person will maneuver themselves out of their wheelchair onto the box and then slide into the boat. Just please make sure that your plank that you are using does not splinter, because the splinter can go into the person and they won't be aware that they have got a splinter, and then it festers and it causes all sorts of problems. And if a person who's sitting in a wheelchair all their life gets a sore on their bum, it takes a long time to heal. So if you're the cause of a splinter going in, that is not a good thing. So make sure those planks are good. Then moving down to the next row on the left-hand side is a hoist. And this is a hydraulic hoist, which is nice to have. But Russell's, I'm sure you guys are using a hand winch with a cable going down and hoisting the people in. So have a look at what can be done. You just need to hoist the person up out of their chair, swing them across and lower them down into the boat. So there's a lot of stuff on the internet that's available, and also in the adaptive manual that SAS has done, there's also stuff there. I quite like this picture in the middle here. It is a person with they are visually impaired, but they've got a helmet on with a burgee on, and then you'll see there's a frame that comes off the burgee, and there's a little brush that is attached to that frame, so that they can feel all the time where the wind's coming from with that little brush. So where the brush is, that's where the wind's coming from. So little adaptations. Remember what I said, ask the people and they will tell you what can be done and what can't be done. Then here we've got a adaptation with a chair, plastic chair with the legs cut off. These adaptations can be made. Just make sure you speak to the people that you're working with and they will tell you. Going down to the bottom left, you'll see there's a cushion right across the boat and around where the person would sit. And then there's a steel bar going across the boat, so they can use the steel bar as a support and a method to pull themselves across to the other side of the boat. Then on the bottom right, a plank again, just in a place where the person can slide across to the other side of the boat. These are just some examples of adaptations that can be made to make sailing available to people with disabilities. In summary, just do it. Don't create barriers. I, for a long time, didn't want to do it because I thought, I've got to get this right, I've got to get that right, I've got to get that right. It's not that difficult. Do it. Start with people that you can manage. So don't rush in there thinking the only people who I need to teach to sail is quadriplegics. Quadriplegics, it is more complicated. You've got to have more equipment. You've got to put have the right boats and so don't rush out and start with quadriplegics. Start with people with amputation. Start with people with even paraplegics. A lot of paraplegics are very mobile. They can move themselves along the ground and into boats and out of boats quite easy. Look what you can handle, get something going, make it happen. Mass participation, we want as many people to sail as possible, but make sure you keep it safe and stay in control of what you're doing. So thank you very much. And now we'll have some discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Malusi, I think, if we want to have any comments and discussion from everyone on the call.
Thank you, Rob. That was very insightful. With that, I think that with the time we did start a bit late. So if anyone feels like they need to go off and do things, please go ahead. We will be sending out communication on the next one, on the next live session. So thank you for joining us. But with that, I would like to start off with the questions, Rob, if I may ask. And it's open to to anyone to answer. But I wanted to know, in your previous talks, you mentioned recreational sailing a lot. Now, considering the topic today, how do we involve other members who may not have facilities to kind of, I'm thinking more on the lines of the spontaneity of people joining the yachts. Maybe you bump into each other at the yacht club and then you decide to go on a sail. For instance, maybe if I bump into someone, a sailor with a disability, maybe want to go sailing. How do we make able-bodied people actually aware of this and possibly have them have the bare minimum of being able to accommodate someone who does have a disability?
Yeah, I think firstly we've got to be exposing our general sailor more to people with disabilities so that they realize it's not a big issue. If I've got a big, I mean, Russell owns his own keelboat, so he can take lots of people out with him. But if I own a keelboat, I can put someone on the boat without too much hassles. I think it's really changing the thinking of people that someone's got a disability, so they need everything special, and we can't just put them on. We need to change that thinking. We need to start it with making people aware that a person with an amputation is fully mobile. They can do almost everything that I can do. It's just maybe going to take a little bit longer, and they've got to be more careful of falling over, but they can do it. So, and a person in a wheelchair can do a lot of things. They can get onto a lot of boats. But I'm speaking here with an expert, a person who's experienced this, sitting on the call. So Russell, I mean, how do we get people to encourage people with disabilities to get on boats?
Yeah, Melissa, to come back to your question, I think let's just sort of face up to the fact that our sport sailing is a challenge at the moment in trying to attract more people. So I think we've got many, many big challenges. But when it comes down to people with disabilities, I've never used my disability as being an issue. I just wanted to go sailing. And I was very fortunate. Now I have a keelboat and I do go sailing. But the guys at the yacht club don't see me as a person in a wheelchair per se. They get hacked off with me when I bump into them, but that's their problem. But how do we get people? Well, I think coming back to Rob's presentation, we were talking about who do we go and sell our sport to? And I'm working with Stellenbosch Marty's Sports Club, and I'm looking to get basketball players to come and go sailing with me. So, we're going to look at some other sports codes and show them that there's something else to do. I'll never forget one of the comments that came from Ernst van Dijk when I was in Sydney. I said to Ernst one day said to me, "But Russell, how often do you go sailing?" I said, "Well, every second day, and we're on the water for 3, 4, 5 hours." And he goes like, "Wow." For him to do the marathon, they really only did it once. And he said, it was like going sailing was almost like 5 marathons for him. He's still one of the people I want to get on the water. But Lucy, it's a case of let's talk to the people out there with disabilities, and I'm in the disability sector. But we also need to get people, members of yacht clubs, to realize that they have friends and family members with disabilities, and they need to understand that they must just bring them down to the yacht club and let's put them on boats, show them what it's about. That's where the SV14 is fantastic. And sorry, it might be a bit of a sales pitch here, but you can put anybody in that front seat. And I'm looking at putting a mate of mine who's a high-level quadriplegic in the front seat because I want Anthony to understand what it is that makes me buzz. With respect to how we get them into the water, if he comes off the water with a big smile on his face and he's not been scared to death, he will come back. And that's what we've got to do. And what Rob's saying is invite the people and also get to those members of the yacht club and let them look beyond their little social circle. It's not very easy to get people with disabilities onto keel boats to work on the boat. But the odd amputee, they can maneuver themselves around the keel boat very easily. But when it comes down to dinghies, the trap seat Hobie was fantastic. And I'll never forget a guy, Derek Kershaw. Rob, you might remember Derek Kershaw. An absolute legend on a Hobie 14. He became Western Province champion in a Hobie 14. And all he did was sail level and flat one regatta, and he won it. And he was a paraplegic, quite a low level, so he had very strong shoulders and arms. But yeah, we must think, I hate the phrase out the box, but we must think differently about how we approach people and say to them, come and join our game, come and join our sport. And yeah, I'm one of the few guys with a disability who's very visible in the game of sailing. And I've got a couple of other mates who have been sailors and want to come and join me. So I'm looking forward to Mac becoming the role model for opening up sailing for PWDs in South Africa.
Thank you very much, Russell. That actually does help. I think in terms of thinking outside the box, I guess we still need to do quite a few of that. But the floor is open for anyone else who wants to ask a question.
Russell, what's the volunteer to or support numbers to candidates in terms of getting onto the water, getting off the water? Is it like on average 2 to 1?
Okay, in terms of the actual management, I think as Rob says, if you division your sailing center to specific disabilities, when it comes to me, Rob led a very hard lesson with me in Thailand that getting a quadriplegic in and out of a boat is a handful. And especially the bigger and longer you are, like myself and Anthony and various guys, we need at least 2 people fully active in getting us in and out of the boats. But that's with a hoist and various technologies and that. When you've got an amputee, many of them, they can rig their boats themselves. They can do a lot of stuff themselves. One of my friends is Heiko Kruger, the German 2.4 MR champion. And he's just a lower arm level amputee. And he used to sell lasers in mainstream sailing. So for him to become a Paralympic sailor, it was like, geez, I'm not really disabled. But in terms of the volunteers, if you can get it, it's always nice to have 2 volunteers per one person with a disability.
Yeah, if I can also come in there, it's with even with paraplegics who are reasonably mobile, they do almost everything. You really want someone on shore that is going to manage the equipment, and that can be one person for 5 or 6 sailors, just to get wheelchairs out the way and everything cleared and secured. But once the people are in the boat, you don't need that many volunteers. And also rigging the boat you need to get the boat rigged, but the same volunteer can rig the boat before the sailors arrive and then help the sailors to the boat. They get into the boat and they go off sailing. So again, I speak about barriers. We don't want to create barriers. And volunteers, yes, with a quadriplegic, and you're using hoists and that, yes, you need more volunteers. But with reasonably able paraplegics and upwards, people with amputations, you probably don't even need volunteers. You just have your coaches and normal support available. So it varies a lot. In the UK, under the RYA Sailability program, they use a lot of volunteers, but there's a culture, people want to volunteer there, and I would go to a center there that where someone someone welcomes the person and writes down all their stuff, and then someone else goes and helps them get changed, and someone else takes them to the water, someone puts them into the boat, someone rides with them while they're in the boat, and they have a massive amount of volunteers. Are those volunteers needed? No, not in most cases. So again, start with a small, easy access, the low-hanging fruit, where you don't need a lot of volunteers, and then you really, I would go on the water with myself and two other people managing as volunteers. So 3 of us working with the people, and then 6 sailors quite comfortably, as long as it's not quadriplegics that you're going to have to hoist into the boat and that sort of thing.
And on the rescue craft, let's take small rib. Is there any specific rescue protocol that we need to follow?
Nothing really specific. You've just got to be aware of things. If you so we need to think of a person in the water that cannot help themselves out of the water. So you've got to take that into account. So whoever's on the rescue craft must be strong enough to, you should always have 2 people at least on the rescue craft, and they need to be strong enough to hoist anybody who is sailing out of the water. So that's the one criteria. And then the other thing is being aware of things like bags and catheters. If someone goes into the water, sometimes a bag can float around and there's pipes and tubes floating around. You've got to be aware of that. And then how you pull the person out. If the person's had a spinal injury, just be aware of the spinal injury. But there's no major differences in what you'd be doing with the safety.
Rob, may I just come in here on the safety?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of it very seriously now at MAC, because on the SV14, it doesn't capsize and the boat rights itself. But just over a year ago, we lost a sailor in England where an RS capsized and he was captured underneath the boat. And many of us are actually strapped into the boat. So the training for the rescue boat needs to have people who are aware of what the person's position is in the boat, so that they can actually get them out from underneath the boat if it's capsized. Yes. And yesterday I met with Cleve Robertson, well, just casually, and I'm getting NSRI involved in Cape Town here at MAC, because I want them to also understand, because they can help us being part of our support structure. But we mentioned, and I realized that my life jacket automatically inflates when it gets wet. So if I'm a boat that's capsized and suddenly my life jacket inflates, I might be able to unstrap myself, but I cannot get myself out from underneath that boat if it's capsized on top of me. So we need to look, and the safety needs a lot of more thought than just in the manual, Rob. So, but at the end of the day, we don't want to stop people from sailing, but when we do have people who are going to be in more need of assistance physically, we need to make sure we've got the support crew on the boat, on the rescue boat, and they know how to address it.
Yeah, so just on what the protocols are internationally with people in the boats, if the boat can capsize, you're not strapped in. They try and avoid strapping in if the boat can go inverted. What happened with the RS venture is the instructor who put the boat together didn't put the keel bolts in that hold the keel in. And the boat went on its side, which is perfectly acceptable, but then the keel actually slipped in, which meant the bulb came onto the bottom of the boat and inverted the boat, and the boat couldn't right itself. So in a boat that is normally wouldn't be able to capsize because it wasn't set up properly, it capsized, and they've changed the system on that because of that incident. So a guideline that is mostly used is try and avoid strapping if the boat can capsize. So on a Hobie or something like that, you'd rather not strap the person in. As far as life jackets and buoyancy aids go, with any sailor on a cat, you've got to be aware that they can get pegged underneath the boat, and then you've got to deal with that. So that should be a standard sort of training within safety boat training. But I agree with you, Russell. Being aware of the potential of someone getting trapped underneath the boat needs to be made aware. The people need to be made aware of that. In the RYA, they don't worry too much about training safety people. We don't want people diving in the water to try and loosen people up and that sort of thing. So that's the general protocols that are used there.
Right. Is there no one else with questions?
Okay. It's Karel Skuman here. Battle to got all of you guys. But after those modifications on the hull cats, yes. And that quite well in for our circumstances at the Val Dam. It's easy to launch. You put the sailor onto a dolly, and you can transfer him from his wheelchair on a transfer board across to the boat. And as long as he's got good, strong upper body and he can swim, that is sort of our basic approach when we arrange or organize introduction to adaptive sailing events, which we've had quite a few, and there's quite a lot of interest. But our bigger challenge is with the Val Dam, and even Anton with you guys at Bronkhorstspruit, we've done it as well, and the sailors there using the hull cats actively, is the follow-up, and for people to get, say, from Joburg, Pretoria, wherever to the Val Dam, that's quite a distance. Mm-hmm. So currently I'm speaking to Shelley at Germiston Lake to see if we can move some of our hull cats for the sailors. And then the schools is also very keen, but the problem there is to get a teacher or somebody who wants to get involved, because you can't attend to everybody and you can't accommodate everybody. Yeah, so things are picking up, and there's not a few challenges when you run an event like that, more on the sailor side, in terms of his support and people that have to help him and to support him. But other than that, yeah, I think there's things is happening, and thank you for this forum that we can discuss this now.
Coral, thank you. I think what you guys did with the Hellcat was amazing. It's a really good thing, and it shows take something that is you've got. I mean, there's a lot of Hellcats just standing around there, and make it work, and you've made it work very well. With sailing in general, the Val is difficult, so I think getting into by Shelley would be a good way to go. But the rest of the challenges you're talking about are general challenges sailing has. So, but that Hellcat was brilliant. Well done on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's only the safety thing. It's a bit of a concern because the sail area is fairly big, and we're also looking at maybe to reef or put a row follower on the jib to reduce the sail area when the gust picks up or the wind picks up. So we still got a long way to go. But yeah, I just love that SV14. I think that's the way to go. I just don't know how we can launch it at the water. Can we put it on a dolly? Because jetties would be a problem for us at Dubai, for instance.
Carl, thank you. I'm very happy to hear people interested in the SV14. I saw Dickie Manton recently in Cape Town around Rio time, and you know, I was thinking of getting up an SV14 up to Val Dam and taking it to Dickie's place and launching it there at the marina there, because they've got deep water because of the keel boats and that. But we are busy adapting the trailer that we have for the SV14 for a slip launch. So we need a slip that we can get the trailer into to a depth of about 1.2 meters. and then the boat will float off, and that's with the keel in the elevated position. When the keel is all the way down, the draft is just on 1.2 meter. So if you've got a slipway where we can get the boat into the water and get it around to like a jetty where we can drop the keel fully, we should be able to sail there, Sarl.
Yeah. We've got most of the clubs got slipways, and but like it's only like a dickie where you've got like a proper harbor type of setup. But most of the other clubs, you will have to use a slipway launch method to launch the SV40.
Yeah, well, our dollies are for slipway launching, so it's just we need depth for the keel to eventually be dropped.
No, we're looking forward to it. Yes.
Cool, yeah. You're on. We're coming up there with the boat.
Yeah, we need the safety. That's our bigger concern, and that's the only thing on the hull cat. At some stage, we were thinking of maybe reducing the sail area, but I've tried to keep it as standard as possible. Like in a half an hour, I can switch it back to a standard hull cat, and we don't have to modify anything else then.
Oh, cool.
Well, if there's no one
okay, thank
else,
you. That's all from my side for now.
Is there no one else who'd like to just add maybe a question or so before we finish up?
If I can jump in for a chance.
Hello?
I think Arthur wanted to say something, and then Lucy. Arthur, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an idea feel for the types of issues that you need to look at in the training of sailing. I know I came in late in the process, but are there specific areas that you need to attend to for adaptive sailing other than the mobility issue that you need to address in the sailing protocol or the sailing methodology? Are there specific fears perhaps that we need to address, or is it basically the question to just ask the person what their concerns are and take it from there?
Yes, I wouldn't change anything in the way I teach. I would be sensitive and speak to them very clearly as, getting their feelings and that, because, but there's nothing I would change in the actual methodology of teaching to sail. It's we're teaching people to sail. You need to loading people in and out of boats. You need to watch a few things, how long your sessions are. So how long you stay on the water, that's a consideration. You don't want to stay on the water too long. But besides that, all the same as I would do with a able-bodied person.
Okay.
Okay.
Arthur,
Lucy.
If I can just endorse what Rob's saying, is that basically you train the person like you train any other sailor. It's the periphery which they then need to guide you on as to what their needs are. So don't try and sort of adapt sailing to the person. Try and get to understand the principles of sailing and how to enjoy it. A discussion that I had with somebody who has had a disability for a long time and was never a sailor. I was a sailor before my disability. So for me, I see sailing differently. And it took me a while to understand that a person who came with a disability afterwards, their understanding of sailing wasn't quite the same as mine, having been an able-bodied sailor. So that is where you need to listen to them as to what their perception is of what they're trying to achieve, rather than you trying to adapt sailing to them. They can then adapt themselves to the sport of sailing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like
Yeah,
the sound.
good point. Good point.
Lucy, you wanted to say something.
I think it was, no, Russell answered the question because I wanted to ask around the trainers and the coaches, how you'd prepare them for students who are disabled. But if it is the same bubble, or rather if you're teaching sailing like you're teaching everyone else, and then I think then it becomes an accessibility conversation and making it more comfortable for them on the yacht or on the boat. But essentially, Russell answered my question. Thank you, Russell. Thank you for that. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Yeah, if I can jump in. And
I think that the main...
Okay.
Right.
Go for it, Sorrel.
I think that the main thing is every athlete's got a specific disability. And as Rob also mentioned earlier, is ask the question how, what, why. And I'm also very much involved at my son's school. And that's where I got involved with the adaptive sailing. Everyone has got his own needs, and to take care of that, to make sure that whoever you put into the boat and how do you put him into the boat, and for the support and the cushions, and that's my part of the challenge, is just to make sure that when you load that sailor into the boat, that he's comfortable and stuff like that.
Okay. Right, guys, thank you very much for joining us today. Just like to get this up. There's definitely things I learned today, and I would very much like to actually gain more information around this to try and actually make sailing accessible, because you don't need so much to enjoy sailing. So with that, the email address is there, guys. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share with us on how we can make sailing better, or maybe you're already on the path of trying to make it more accessible and perhaps you need some assistance or of any kind, maybe we can try and assist as South African Sailing. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining, and I look forward to having you guys here for the next session, which we will send communication out once we are ready to go live with that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated. And yeah, let's have another one of these sessions sometime soon.